Are we truly preparing our children for the world they will actually inherit? Or are we shielding them from it? Well, that question keeps many of us awake at night. As public school administrators and central office staff, you have wrestled with it in boardrooms, budget meetings, and hallway conversations. You have watched parents agonize over school choice, weighing options on spreadsheets, comparing test scores and tuition rates, sometimes pulling their children from the very institutions that could prepare them best for the complex, interconnected, beautifully diverse world waiting just beyond graduation day. Now, here's what I have come to believe after years of working alongside educators who pour themselves into public schools. The diversity that some families nervously sidestep is not a liability. It is the most powerful, irreplaceable feature that traditional public schools offer. And we have not done nearly enough to say so out loud. You see, when school leaders talk about diversity, we often make the same well-intentioned mistake. We frame it as a challenge to be managed, a gap to be closed, a tension to be navigated, or a compliance checkbox to be completed. We talk about it in terms of what it costs us rather than what it builds in our students. Now, that framing does real damage, not because the challenges are not real, but because it subtly and persistently communicates that difference is a problem rather than a preparation. Parents hear that framing. Children internalize it. And before long, a school community that should feel like a microcosm of the world begins to feel like an obstacle course. Now, we need to make a shift. And that shift will change everything. The shift is not a new program or new policy. It is a new lens. The question is not how do we manage our diverse student body. The question is how do we leverage it? Now, I'm going to share with you some research because I know you're wondering, is this just based on my personal belief? No. Researchers at Harvard's Project Zero have long documented that students who learn in intellectually and culturally diverse environments demonstrate stronger critical thinking, deeper empathy, and greater creative problem-solving capacity. The American Psychological Association has similarly affirmed that cross-cultural competence, the ability to work effectively across lines of difference, is among the most sought-after attributes in both higher education and the modern workforce. You see, the world your child will graduate into does not sort itself by zip code or income bracket. It is globally networked, demographically shifting, and stubbornly, gloriously complex. LinkedIn's 2023 workforce report identified adaptability and collaboration across diverse teams as the top 2 human skills employers struggle to find in new hires. So, these are not skills that emerge solely from a curriculum. They are forged in the daily, ordinary, irreplaceable experience of sitting next to someone whose story is different from yours and learning slowly to understand it. Public schools are where that forging happens. I think often about a story that resonates deeply with this work. A principal in an urban school district, the kind of school where more than 30 home languages were spoken in the hallways, once described to me the moment she stopped seeing the linguistic diversity of her student body as a barrier to instruction. A veteran third grade teacher in her building had begun a practice she called story circles, where students were invited once a week to share something from home, a tradition, a meal, a word in their home language that had no English equivalent. What that teacher observed over the course of 1 year was not simply increased engagement, though engagement did increase. She watched children who had never spoken voluntarily in class find their voices. She watched children from fifth-generation American families discover that they too had a story worth telling. And she watched something even more remarkable. Children began to advocate for one another. They started correcting each other gently, protectively, when a classmate's culture was misrepresented or mocked. They had become, in the truest sense, a community. The teacher did not have a specialized credential in multicultural education. She had a belief, grounded in practice, that every child in her room had something to teach the others, and she built her classroom accordingly. That is public education at its finest, not despite its diversity, but because of it. So, what does it look like when school leaders get this right? It begins with narrative. Before we cite statistics or roll out professional development frameworks, we tell stories. True ones, specific ones, the kind that make parents lean forward and think. Think that this is what I want for my child. It continues with intentional design. Schools that successfully cultivate cross-cultural competence do not leave it to chance. They weave it into advisory programs, service learning opportunities, restorative practice circles, and project-based learning units that require genuine collaboration. The Facing History and Ourselves organization, which has partnered with public schools across the country since 1976, provides a research-backed framework for teaching students to examine history, identity, and human behavior in ways that build both academic skills and civic character. And it is sustained by honest self-reflection among the adults in the building. So, are we sitting students strategically? Are we assigning collaborative work across social groups? Or allowing self-segregation to become the default? Are we celebrating multilingualism as an asset or treating it as an inconvenience? Well, the answer to those questions reveal whether diversity is truly being leveraged or merely tolerated. So here is my challenge to every administrator and central office leader reading these words today. In your next community meeting, your next open house, your next conversation with a parent who is weighing school options, lead with the story of what diverse, connected public school learning produces in a child. Not the test scores, not the extracurricular list, the story. Tell them about the third grader who learned empathy in a story circle. Tell them about the high school junior who learned negotiation, not in a business class, but in a group project with 4 students who saw the world entirely differently from her. Tell them what the research confirms and what your teachers witness every single day. That the children who learn to thrive across differences do not just become better students. They become better colleagues, better neighbors, better citizens, and ultimately, better human beings. The world your children will graduate into is already waiting for them. Traditional public schools are not just preparing them for that world. In many of the most important ways, they are already being prepared for that world. And the fact of the matter is, your children are already in that world. And that, for every family making a school choice decision, is worth everything. So, what story from your school community best illustrates the power of diversity as preparation? And are you telling it loudly enough?